So our next presenter is from a little bit closer. We have Ariel Carpenter from the City of San Jose, and the tool that she's going to be talking about is their Energy and Water Building Performance Ordinance. And I also wanted to point out I'm not reading the speaker bios, but they are on the back of the agenda, so you can learn about all your speakers there. Thanks, Ariel.
Awesome. Is this right? Okay, cool. Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Ariel Carpenter. I work for the City of San Jose, and I'll be talking to you today about our Energy and Water Building Performance Ordinance. Before I get started, I wanted to give our team a little shout out because yesterday at San Jose City Council, we approved the adoption of a new electrification REACH code. So we're the largest city, to our knowledge, in the U.S. to adopt a code like this. So we're really excited about that too. I didn't do that, so don't clap for me. So our Energy and Water Building Performance Ordinance, though, was adopted at the very end of 2018. And before I jump into the details of that, I always like to give a little bit of background about how we came to adopt that policy in the first place. That policy was really closely aligned with our climate action plan, Climate Smart San Jose, and is directly tied to some of the specific measures that are tracked through that plan. So we really were super excited about that being passed and that being kind of the green light for us to start working on this ordinance. In addition to the support through our climate action plan, I can't say enough about the City Energy Project, which was a grant program that we participated in from 2017 through 18. That was funded by the Natural Resources Defense Council and the Institute for Market Transformation. They supported us with tons of technical assistance as well as staff funding to help us pursue not only the ordinance, but a ton of different complementary efficiency resource programs. And that made all of this work possible. So why did we even really want to pursue a benchmarking ordinance like this in the first place? We really believe that benchmarking supports market transformation. And our handy little graphic here kind of demonstrates that. So as a building owner tracks their energy or water use over time, they are able to make more informed decisions about the way they operate their buildings, the capital opportunities they have, and like that they may have never tracked before. And through the collection of data over this first year, some of the people that were coming in for assistance, I was actually surprised that they weren't already tracking their energy use. So it really demonstrated the need for this ordinance. And then once those properties report their use to us through their annual benchmarking report, the city has access to all of this data that we've never had before either. It's crazy to think that so many governments don't know anything about their building stock. So really the long game of this ordinance, and what makes me so excited, is that we have the opportunity moving forward to potentially design new rebate and incentive programs that are specifically targeted to the needs of our city. So that's the long game for us. And then lastly, once we publish that data, we hope that allows the market to be more educated. So if you have, for instance, a prospective tenant going into an apartment complex or a commercial office space, they know much more about what their potential utilities could be. They have a better opportunity and more leverage to discuss efficiency upgrades with their landlord, and just to normalize efficiency and building performance as part of the conversation with people where it might not have been there before. So all of that, we hope, will really move the market towards improved efficiency. And considering our victory yesterday, I think it really demonstrated that. So talking a little bit more about the development timeline and how we rolled this ordinance out, we were awarded our City Energy Project grant in the summer of 2016. And we really spent all of 2017 researching and developing our strategy for moving forward with that ordinance. In February of 2018, that was when the Climate Smart Plan was adopted, and that was, again, our green light, ready to go. And that same month, we hit the ground running with our task force meetings. So we did those over the course of the next 6 or 7 months, and we presented draft ordinance language to the task force in July of that same year. And lucky enough, the ordinance was approved by City Council at the very end of 2018. And I touched on a few of the benefits already of building performance ordinances, but to rattle off a few other things for you. Obviously, policies like these decrease energy and water use across cities. Looking at statistics from other places that have had policies in place for longer periods of time, those savings across communities can range between 3 and 11%, which is pretty notable. And of course, healthier buildings, more efficient buildings are frequently more healthy buildings, and that's something that's especially important in a multifamily setting. And then additionally, from an economic standpoint, we believe that ordinances like these increase the number of efficiency jobs across markets and especially locally. So we think that there will be more local efficiency and sustainability in San Jose moving forward. There we go. So diving into our ordinance task force, which I think was the most important process leading up to the adoption of this policy. That lasted again for over 7 months. We engaged with over 50 organizations and 100 individuals over that course of time. It was a really intensive process, and we had 6 formal meetings that were about a half a day each. It was actually really impressive that we were able to get a critical mass of people to attend a monthly meeting for half a day for this long. But people were really, really engaged. And as you can kind of see from the list of topics that we discussed, we really intentionally broke the process down topic by topic, really unpacking what the ordinance could include, to be really intentional about that. And during that time, we were also lucky enough to have assistance from Global Green, which was a third-party consultant who facilitated, facilitated those conversations for us. And throughout that entire process, honestly, there was really, really minimal negative feedback. Holistically, the task force members were really just saying, whatever we need to do to meet our climate action goals, like, we need to do it, but let's make sure that it's as tailored as possible to our local market, and that, you know, if the city wants to do something ambitious, we need to have the resources to help those buildings that are going to need to comply, which is totally reasonable and at the end of the day makes the best policy possible, right? And then just to give you a couple example slides of the types of information that we were looking at through those meetings, this is one of the graphics that shows a few different threshold options for the ordinance. So you can see a policy that has a 50,000 square foot threshold. You can see the number of buildings that covers, the percent of citywide buildings that covers, as well as the percent of gross square footage. So you can toggle between all of those options to figure out kind of what the sweet spot is. And then again, here's a number of different data points when you're looking at the transparency component of an ordinance. Here, again, we were actually really pleasantly surprised that there were no data points that were of concern to stakeholders. So we got all the data. And then at the end of every meeting, we held a good amount of time for discussion. And these are a couple example questions that we posed to the group. One of the most specific things that we did was making sure that none of the questions we asked were just yes or no questions. We really wanted to foster a healthy discussion around all of these topics and really look at everything from as many angles as possible. And then where we landed. So our ordinance covers commercial and multifamily buildings over 20,000 square feet. It includes both energy and water annual benchmarking, as well as some rolling 5-year requirements that we've kind of dubbed the beyond benchmarking requirements, so that buildings can really kind of choose their own destiny, pursuing either a performance or an improvement pathway. So I'll dive into those a little bit in the next slide. Unfortunately, through the political process, our Transportation and Environment Committee, and then going to City Council, we did need to settle on an exemption for multifamily buildings over 50,000 square feet for the beyond benchmarking requirements for water if those properties did not have water submetering, which is kind of a mouthful. The reasoning for that was due to the fact that a lot of these properties are limited in terms of what costs they can pass on to a tenant. Some of those dynamics are probably city specific, but for us it was under our ARO ordinance. It's a rent ordinance, and so the list of upgrades on that list, that the cost for which could be passed on to the tenant, was fairly limited. And I think in terms of setting that threshold for the smaller multifamily buildings within that cohort, that was done kind of as a sentiment to protect the little guy. So that was something that we didn't necessarily expect to happen. I would highly suggest, as folks in this room are thinking about new ordinances that might impact the multifamily sector, to really, really closely coordinate with your housing department and third parties, both in terms of like advocacy groups and trade associations on that side, and retailers both on the water and energy side, because they know all the information about the metering arrangements within particular properties, what things are feasible, what the pain points are, and really having that groundwork laid before you start out. And then, can you guys see the words in the little bubbles? Okay, enough. So basically, this is a more graphical depiction of what the different beyond benchmarking pathway options look like. So your first option is to meet any number of these target metrics on both the energy and water side. So having a high-performing building, effectively, or having improved your building's performance over the course of the last 5 years that you've been benchmarking. Or you can be LEED E-Bomb certified. And then if you aren't able to do any of those things, we'll have you go through that improvement pathway. So either going through an ASHRAE Level 2 energy audit, energy or water retrocommissioning, or going through specific energy or water efficiency improvement measures in cases where the building doesn't have central HVAC. So we really wanted to create as many different options for compliance as possible. And we feel like we did a pretty good job of that. We really had support from some really great people. Even the ex-president of the Building Owners and Managers Association for the South Bay gave us accolades for this work. So, and then a little bit of a status update. This last year, our ordinance was approved by the California Energy Commission to effectively take over reporting jurisdiction from them for AB 802. So buildings within the San Jose territory only need to report to the city of San Jose. They don't need to report twice. We had our first compliance deadline for buildings over 50,000 square feet on May 1st of this year. So our ramp up was 5 months, which was about half of what a normal ordinance like this looks like, but we made it work with plenty of staff help. We've received to date about 645 reports, and we're still going through and verifying each of those reports ourselves, but it looks like we've got at least 460 verified in compliance this time. In addition, for fiscal year 2019-20, we'll be implementing a cost recovery system, meaning that buildings, when they submit their benchmarking report, will also submit a fee of $150 to comply, which funds our staff time and resource creation and things like that. So more to come on how that goes over. But during those 5 months, we really were sprinting to develop as many resources as possible and to do as much outreach as we possibly could. We hosted 9-hour-long live webinars, recordings of which are available online if any of you look at them. We hosted 5 half-day open office hour sessions, so people could literally just walk to City Hall, and we had our laptops out and we're ready to help them in a really hands-on manner. We answered and responded to thousands of one-on-one assistance calls, screen shares, emails. We really tried to meet people where they work to help them comply with the ordinance, which is kind of really the most important part of doing this work in the first place, I feel like. And then in terms of actual collateral that we generated, we have a general flyer, a frequently asked questions document, a compliance checklist that sounds short but is like 15 pages long, an extension and exemption request form, as well as our published covered buildings list. And then into the good stuff for you guys. Hopefully everybody in this room, like has already been said, is thinking about different kinds of ordinances and to move the needle, especially in today's political climate. Some of the things that we found along the way that were really, really important were the need for early and frequent interdepartmental engagement. So like I said, engagement with your housing department. We talked very, very frequently with our Office of Economic Development to make sure that they were comfortable with all the people that we were reaching out to, making sure that we were talking to the people that all these internal leaders cared about. Leveraging our existing relationships to build those stakeholder networks out further. So, we're all doing this work already. If you don't already know some of the people you want in the room, the people you know who should be in the room. So ask those questions, keep having those conversations as frequently as you can. And then starting to map your existing resources ahead of time, both on that stakeholder front as well as on the resource side of things. So making sure that you know exactly what rebates and incentives are out there for all of these projects that people might be required to do. So if someone comes to you with a concern, you have a solution ready to go. Makes you look really good. And then again, always asking who isn't here, who should be here. Throughout our task force, we asked that at the end of every single meeting, and we, had industry association people making calls for us to actually get the right people in the room, which was awesome. They were doing the legwork for us. And then talking to other cities, you don't need to recreate the wheel. San Francisco and Berkeley have been so helpful to us as we've been developing our ordinance. We've talked to folks, within the state and all the way up to New York City. Everybody's willing to help you in whatever way they can. And hopefully, from our lessons learned, if anybody has questions, I'm happy to share with you any of the resources that we've developed. Finally, begin drafting your ordinance early. It doesn't necessarily seem like it would be that time-consuming. It takes months, and you'll have, so many people, their eyes on it, making questions. You don't want to be down to the 11th hour debating the definition of a or entire, which is something you probably still will be doing, but try not to create that headache for yourself. And then lessons learned through implementation. Again, leveraging those industry and trade associations in your outreach. So we had BOMA and all of these different folks sending out email blasts, newsletters. I presented to a few of those organizations myself. They want to get the word out to their members who are impacted so that they're not out of compliance. It's in their best interest to spread the word for you. And then accounting for technical skill of building owners. Unfortunately, that really did become a time-consuming part of our implementation process. But again, we're the government. We're supposed to provide that value to the community, so it's really important to do that. And then one of the points that's very specific to multifamily properties especially is some of the misconceptions about data access. We had a number of multifamily building owners come to us with concerns saying, like, how do I get this usage data when my tenants have their own energy accounts? I'm not going to go to 100 people and ask for this. They don't have to. Surprise, the CEC and PG&E had worked, and at least within PG&E's territory, we have an aggregated benchmarking data platform, so they don't have to talk to all those people. You can get one virtual meter, I'll call it, set up through Energy Star Portfolio Manager, the benchmarking. So that was always a really awesome thing that we could use to turn that conversation around. And then ensuring that we have a fully dedicated staff team available in the week leading up to and immediately after the reporting deadline. You will get a peak in people reaching out. Our voicemail box filled up, and we were checking it daily. I would say that working with seasonal staff is really, really helpful. We had a bunch of Climate Corps fellows on board, and they were integral in getting this work done. So I'd recommend resources like that if you can. And then my last bullet got a little bit messed up, but for us, one thing that I wish we had done a little bit differently was being conscious of building our covered buildings list and some of the discrepancies between where we got that data and the way our ordinance was written. So, for instance, our covered buildings list is based off of tax assessor data, which is filtered by use codes county. Exemptions in our ordinance are based off of city zoning, so there's some discrepancies there. So keeping things like that in mind moving forward definitely will help you resolve some of those issues. And then this is a nice little animation. There's tons of other helpful third-party resources out there available for you. Like I mentioned in the very beginning of my presentation, the Institute for Market Transformation was one of the partners in the City Energy Project, and they have a public-facing website that's got so many awesome documents that you can use to help inform your implementation. Some of these have kind of been like my mini Bibles moving through this process, and you can download them for free whenever you like. And then there's buildingrating.org. It's another search portal where you can literally look and just see what other similar ordinances exist around the world. And they have really great filterable columns. So you can figure out exactly the data points you're looking for as you put your resources together. These are some of the links, so people will have those later. And that's it for me.
Great. Thank you, Ariel. We have 5 minutes for questions. Who has questions for Ariel? And wait for a mic. Okay, there's one all the way in the back. Oh, and please announce yourself if you feel comfortable doing that.
Okay. I'm Alice. I'm from the County of Marin. Congrats. It's really exciting. So you mentioned like a handful of varying staff demands, but like I know that this has been a thing for and would you say this is like 1, 2 full-time staff positions to manage a program like this?
So are you asking specifically about management or development? Because those are slightly different.
More management. I think that like the development is
Yeah.
like easy to find time when you're like, okay, we're gonna do a big thing, but this sort of takes a lot of care.
Totally. It is dependent on the number of buildings that are covered by your ordinance. So this number definitely is specific to us and our covered buildings list of about 2,100. But even so, this first year we were really only engaging with about 1,000 people since we've rolled censuses. It was me full time and then a full-time Climate Corps fellow.
And Administrator Design Avenue. I was wondering how many people showed up at your open office half days.
Yeah, we will probably still do them just to remain available, but the attendance was pretty low. Within a 4-hour period, we might have 2 to 3 people come in. We had tried using like an online scheduling assistant that people could click through, and nobody used that. We never found that we were strapped to assist multiple people in one. So.
Hi, Heather Bird from California Energy Commission. So you just mentioned 2,100 qualified buildings. I think you said about 640 some odd submissions this year. Interested in compliance methods?
Yeah.
Those numbers.
Right. So that's the number of reports, and then we have the ones that we have like approved. In addition to those, there's folks who have actually filed extensions. So there's based off of our covered buildings list and accounting for all those factors, we're actually looking at about a 75% compliance rate within that code. So I'm kind of happy with that. Yeah. And that probably will decrease next year when we drop the threshold to be a little bit lower. So.
Hi, Leif Christensen, Statewide Efficiency Collaborative. My question is about your decision to go after this benchmark, which goes state has in place in terms of their benchmarking. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that assessment in terms of how yours does go above and beyond, and how that, how you made the case for that given the requirements of the state.
Basically, just like why we wanted to do more.
How it was different, and how the work that you're now having to do is justified benefits that you have created beyond.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So to crack a little bit of a joke, like if we were going to do exactly what they were doing, it would be worth the staff time. But we really wanted to make sure we were capturing as much savings as we possibly could, and we also realized the additional data that we could collect through the additional steps. At a high level, our first, looking at all of the buildings that report this year that have accurate reports, average G-star score is 69, actually very high, or I think that's pretty high. So we were really pleasantly surprised by that. But we really are excited about specifically the retro-commissioning of the policy. I think that it is a fairly high-cost measure, audit and the risk of that sitting on the shelf.
Consulting. I have a question about the public access of competitors to license and people being able to market.
Totally. So we have an exemption category for people who feel like their consumption data is like a trade secret or should be treated as proprietary. We had file that. And other than that, from talking to other cities that have done this before us, they had actually hoped for more third parties approaching them with their services. So people aren't necessarily being inundated with vendors. I do know that there were a few who sent out mailers, like notifying people about it and volunteering their services, but it hasn't seemed to be overwhelming or an issue.
Great, and we have one more. Like,
I wondered if you were providing resources for folks who were interested in qualified engineering firms, retro-commissioning agents.
Totally. So the answer is we're working on it. I'm working on a hopefully long-standing RFI for each of those categories, so we'll frequently be updating a list of active providers. So hopefully we will have that ready to go about a year and a half before those additional requirements kick in.
Okay, and we'll do one last one.
Hi, Adrienne from Brisbane. First off, Ariel, thank you so much. We've been working through this process, following your ordinance very closely, as you know, and appreciate all the help and leadership you've shown. One question we recently got from some of our policymakers was related to the conflict between tenants and owners for like situations with triple net leases where the owner has the ability to pass on all of those capital costs to the tenants. So I'm curious if that was something that came up through your task force meetings, if you have any guidance on how to address that question.
It's definitely a hard nut. San Jose, the overwhelming majority of our properties do have leases like that, so your tenants are responsible for most of those expenses. We didn't necessarily have a solution for that, and our ordinance a requirement on building owners. A contrasting example of that is the city of Atlanta. The tenants, that's who the program impacted directly. I actually wasn't even aware of that strategy until after we passed our ordinance, so I think that would have been a thing that we perhaps should have teased out a little bit more in our development. But at the same time, we didn't really, nothing was flagged, nothing came up as a crucial issue through the task force on that front.
Great. Okay, we're gonna stop it here, but we'll have time for questions on the panel.